You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter @RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, except no imitation. Seeing as though for the foreseeable future, the baseball news that we're going to get is going to concern CBA proposals, figured I'd start with MLB free agency. The lockout will happen. There was a report that said that the two sides met, but it was only for like a half hour. We're going to have a lockout, and it's going to last for a while. The players don't trust Manfred, and I don't blame them. Major League Baseball confirmed a report that said that they used two different baseballs last year. No one knew that. So wait a second, we're so concerned about the baseball that we're banning spider tack, that we're checking pitchers almost every inning because we want to keep the baseball pure. But we'll introduce two different baseballs without telling anyone? That defies all logic. Look, if you want to use two different baseballs, if there was really a supply chain issue with Rawlings in their factory in Costa Rica because of the pandemic, you can read the report. This is all in there. It's very easy to find on the internet. You know, that's fine, but tell people. Tell the players. Tell the fans. You're so concerned about the integrity of the ball itself, but you're using different baseballs without telling anyone? I'd be furious about this if I was a baseball player. You'll wonder why the players don't trust Manfred. We're going to have a lockout for a really long time. Like, we may even have a shortened season. How devastating would that be to baseball? People call into question the integrity of the game already. You have the Astros sign stealing, you have steroids, you have sticky stuff, you have the 60-game joke. Now it seems like you're staring down the barrel of another shortened season. It's one thing if you need a shortened season because you finished your previous season late, and there just isn't enough time to play a full season. Alright, the NHL and the NBA did that, and no one really had an issue with it. I mean, towards the end, I was a little upset with the NHL. I just got tired of seeing the same teams over and over again. But I understood it. You're trying to deal with the pandemic. You're trying to deal with different countries. At the time, not a ton of people were vaccinated, so I totally get it. But now these leagues are playing full seasons. The NHL is bending over backwards to play a full season. It was tough, but Major League Baseball played a full season. To have another shortened one? now that we're on the right side of the pandemic, I understand the Omicron variant. We've got to wait and see what happens with that. I don't want to make any predictions. I'm not a scientist. But at the end of the day, to have another shortened season could be a death blow to Major League Baseball. Interest is already waning. It's the third sport in this country behind football and basketball. You know, you've got millionaires fighting with billionaires. Here's the thing. No one's going to feel bad for the owners because they're billionaires. And no one's going to feel bad for the players because they're millionaires. And the fans just saw guys like Corey Seager, Max Scherzer, Robbie Ray, Kevin Gausman, Marcus Semien, etc., get huge contracts in free agency. You want to tell me they're the exceptions rather than the rule? It's tough to justify that. We see big contracts signed in baseball all the time. At the end of the day, even if you're arbitration eligible, you're still making millions of dollars. To cry poverty is ridiculous. And for the owners to cry poverty is ridiculous. I mean, both sides need to be really careful here. You may be concerned about service time. You may be concerned about a salary cap or a salary floor or the luxury tax, whatever. But be careful. If this lockout goes on for a really long time and we have a shortened season or worse, you're going to alienate a lot of fans and you may not be able to get them back. You don't have steroids to fall back on. You've already vilified it. There may be no coming back for a long time if this lockout results in a shortened season or worse. Now look, if the lockout just impacts spring training, maybe there's a shortened spring training, or maybe the World Series gets pushed back to like the middle of November, okay. You can live with that. That's not the end of the world. It's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world. And even if you cancel like a handful of games, even if you make it like 154 games like it once was, maybe a little less, it's not the end of the world. But if you start lopping off more than that, you're rolling the dice. Both sides are playing with fire here, and I really hope they realize that. I understand that you need to fight for your clients. Manfred needs to fight for the owners. Tony Clark needs to fight for the players. That's their job. But for the good of the sport, for the good of the league, for the good of these players that were already hurt economically because of the pandemic, that had their salaries slashed by only playing 60 games, for the owners that lost revenue because of the pandemic. Be smart. Don't lose sight of the grand picture, which is the betterment of baseball as a whole. You may win the battle. You may get everything you want. But if you have a shortened season, or worse, you're going to lose the war. And I don't think you'll ever be able to recover from that. Okay, I went down the rabbit hole there. I didn't really expect to. This is just ticking me off. Lockouts are never good. Remember in the early 2010s when like every sport had a lockout? The NHL had a lockout, the NFL had a lockout, the NBA had a lockout. The NFL referees got locked out. The one constant was baseball, and the league and the Players Association was praised for that. Now we've had relative labor peace for a while. Baseball's gonna break that streak. Look, at the end of the day, the NFL lockout was annoying. But no meaningful games were canceled. The NBA lockout was annoying. But the Mavericks beat the big bad Heat in the NBA Finals, so all was forgiven. The NHL lockout was rough, but it really wasn't the end of the world. Like I said, if this is over in a couple months, no one's gonna care. It's just if it extends into March, April, May, etc., that's when we're gonna have real issues. You know, I'm a huge baseball fan. You know that about me. It's my favorite sport. The sport that I love, that I grew up watching, has been desecrated enough. Analytics have ruined it. Instead of actually watching the game, using your eyes, using your noodle, people are saying, look at his WAR, look at his FIP, look at his WOBA. That's how you properly evaluate players. Give me strength. The sport that I love has been ruined enough. Don't let it go any further. That's the big issue here. And no one's talking about it. Baseball today is worse than it was 20 years ago. It just is. People talk about fixing baseball. People talk about outlawing the shift, universal DH, all that stuff. Go back to the way it was played 20 years ago. That's baseball. Not this 3 true outcomes nonsense. Not this openers nonsense. Not this bullpen games nonsense. That's the real issue here. It's not service time. It's not the luxury tax. It's the fact that baseball today is worse than it was 20 years ago. That's what Manfred and Clark need to focus on. Alright, like I said, I went down the rabbit hole more than I wanted to. I'm sorry, it's just this infuriates me. Let's get into the transactions now. I'll start with the Angels, bringing back Raisel Iglesias on a 4-year deal worth $58 million. That's $14.5 million per year. And this is a great move for the Angels. Iglesias was by far and away the best reliever in free agency. No one else came close. This guy went 7-5 last year with a 2.57 ERA. He had 34 saves. He's had at least 28 saves every year since 2017, excluding 2020. Kind of tough to have 28 saves in a 60-game season. That would be pretty cool if he pulled that off, but not going to happen. I mean, Iglesias got Cy Young votes last year. Like, I remember when the Yankees went to LA to face the Angels, Michael Kay was saying, if the Yankees are gonna win this game, they've gotta get a lead before the top of the 9th inning, because Iglesias is fantastic. And you know what? He's right. The Angels stole him away from the Reds. That trade never made sense for Cincinnati. Give the Angels credit for recognizing how great Iglesias is. The contract is fair. It values him as one of the best closers in baseball, which he is. I don't think there's a question about that. Outstanding job by the Angels. The AL West next year, if we get it next year, but at the end of the day, I think we will. Call me a cockeyed optimist, but I do think we're going to get a season next year. I don't think we're going to get a full season. I think we're going to get a shortened season. Maybe it'll be something like it was in 95, 145 games. Maybe 81, 107 games. I don't think they'll split the season in two, but I think the raw total of games could be the same. Maybe a little less. I do think we're going to get baseball next year. I don't think we're going to get like 60 games or something like that. So with that in mind, people, when they're looking at the AL West, are talking about teams like the Astros, Mariners, and Rangers. Don't look past the Angels. They have two of the best players in the world in Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. They've made a concerted effort to get better this offseason. They added Noah Syndergaard. They added Michael Lorenzen. They're bringing back Iglesias. Look, I understand that the Angels probably aren't as good as teams like the Astros and Mariners, but I don't think they're any worse than the Rangers. I'm not in love with the Rangers. Great job adding Seager and Simeon, but you want to add some pitching? John Gray doesn't count. John Gray isn't that good. Here's what I foresee happening. I think the Astros and Mariners will duke it out for first place in the AL West, and the Rangers and Angels will duke it out for third. I mean, I'll tell you right now, assuming there's no change to the playoff structure, I don't think I see the Rangers making the playoffs this coming season. Like, I don't think the Rangers are going to get much better than this. Maybe they'll make some cursory upgrades, but this is basically it. They just handed out 3 huge contracts in free agency. Do you see them adding a 4th? I don't. You know the Yankees are going to do something. You know the Red Sox are going to do something. Adding James Paxton doesn't count. You know they're going to do more. The Rays probably aren't finished. Maybe the Blue Jays aren't finished. I don't think the Tigers are finished. The point is, all those teams can still get better. The Rangers aren't going to get much better than this. They'll be a solid team next season. I think they'll hover around 500. Same thing with the Angels. But I don't think either team's making the playoffs. Moving on now to the White Sox, bringing back Leury Garcia on a 3-year deal worth $16.5 million. That's $5.5 million per year. And I saw some people criticizing this. Why are you giving Leury Garcia 3 years? I have no problem giving Leury Garcia 3 years. Leury Garcia is one of the best utility guys in all of baseball. I mean, this guy last year played every position except pitcher, catcher, and first base. And you know what? If you asked him to play one of those 3 positions, he'd probably do it. I mean, the last time he was on a pitcher's mound, he threw a scoreless inning. He pitched the 8th inning of a 17-6 blowout loss by the White Sox against the Athletics. I mean, I've said this before. You don't need every guy on your team to be a star. Not all 26 guys on your roster are going to be stars. You need role players. You need utility guys. You need guys that are just gonna go out there and do their job every day, that are willing to do the little things. Hey, Lurie, this guy needs a day off. Or, hey, Lurie, this guy's gonna spend some time on the IL. Can you fill in for him? Sir, yes, sir. That's Garcia. Last year, he had .267 with 5 home runs and 54 RBIs. He's just an all-around good player to have. Has decent speed. You want to tell me 3 years is too much for a guy like that? He's 30. He's going to turn 31 on March 18th. I mean, the guy shares a birthday with Zdeno Chara, Guy Lafleur, Bonnie Blair, and yours truly. He can't be all bad. Fine, maybe no one was rushing to give him a multi-year commitment. But $5.5 million for 3 years for one of the best utility guys in the majors, I have no problem with that. Outstanding job by the White Sox. Moving on now to the Giants, signing Alex Cobb to a 2-year deal worth $20 million. Cobb will get $9 million next year and the year after. Then in 2024, the Giants have a $10 million option on him with a $2 million buyout. So he is guaranteed $20 million, but he can get as much as $28 million. And this is a good move for the Giants. Alex Cobb, when healthy, is a solid starting pitcher. Certainly he has injury concerns. There's no question about it. I mean, from 2019 on, he's only pitched 158 innings. But last year for the Angels, he was good. He went 8-3 with a 3.76 ERA. You can do worse than having Alex Cobb as your third starter. He's a solid pitcher. And for a Giants team that just lost Kevin Gausman to the Blue Jays, you've got to replace him somehow. Signing Cobb is a good way to do that. I have no issues with this contract. I like Cobb. Good pitcher. This move makes a ton of sense for the Giants. Moving on now to the Mariners, signing Andres Munoz to a 4-year extension worth at least $7.5 million. This deal also has 3 team options on it, so Munoz can be a Mariner for the next 7 seasons. If you don't know who Andres Munoz is, that's okay. Had a good rookie year for the Padres in 2019. Went 1-1 with a 3.91 ERA. Looked like he was going to turn into a solid reliever for him. Then at not this past trade deadline, the deadline before, he was traded to the Mariners in that big 7-player deal that sent Austin Nola to the Padres, Luis Torrens to the Mariners. He was part of that trade. But he didn't pitch at all that year. He got hurt in spring training in 2020. He needed Tommy John surgery. And last year, he only pitched in 1 game, the last game of the season. So it begs the question, why are you locking him up now? Munoz has talent. That's why. He has one of the best fastballs in the majors. I mean, it regularly hits triple digits. At least it did in 2019. Will it next year? Coming back from Tommy John surgery? Who knows? But this kid has a ton of talent. And you look at the Mariners, they're a team that really doesn't have a true closer. I mean, Munoz can be a future closer for the Mariners. He is that talented. So we just saw Raisel Iglesias get $14.5 million per year from the Angels. Munoz is getting just about half that in totality, along with team options. So you lock him in at a fair value, less than $2 million per year. You have him under control for his first 3 seasons of free agency, or at least it would be that way under the current CBA. This is my issue with it. The Mariners are doing this deal under the assumption that the service time agreement is going to stay the same. We know it's not. Under the current CBA, Munoz would be under team control with the Mariners through 2025 without this extension. When the new CBA kicks in, maybe Munoz is under control for longer. There's such an unknown variable with this deal. I just don't understand why the Mariners did this. They could have waited. Wait until the next CBA, until you know the service time rules, before you give him this extension. It's impossible to predict how exactly service time and when players are going to hit free agency is going to shake out in terms of the new CBA. What I do know is it makes no sense for the Mariners to sign him now. If your goal is to get more team control, that's fine, but you didn't need to do that with this extension. Like, just wait a little bit. I just don't get it. It's risky. There are unknown variables here. It's not an unreasonable value or anything, but it's just hard to justify the logic behind this deal. They should have waited. Wait until you know the rules of the game first before you try to play it in terms of trying to control guys for longer periods of time. Moving on now to the Pirates replacing Jacob Stallings with Roberto Perez. The Pirates signed Perez to a 1-year deal worth $5 million because Roberto Perez and Jacob Stallings are equal players, right? Maybe in terms of defensive ability they are. Perez is a very good fielding catcher. Alright, he is one of the best fielding catchers in the majors. And it's weird, like, in 2019, you thought this guy would be great. He had 24 home runs, he won a Gold Glove, then he just fell off a cliff in the shortened season. Last year, he only played in 44 games, hit 149. Look, I understand that the Pirates needed to replace Stallings, but that's a tough sell to your fan base. Even though no one's going to mistake Jacob Stallings for Ivan Rodriguez anytime soon, he's not a bad offensive catcher. He hit 246 last year. You're replacing him with a guy who hit 97 points lower. Look, I understand that the catching market was barren. Part of the reason why the Yankees brought back Sanchez, and I'll get into that more a little later, but look, while there's logic to, if you can't find a good offensive catcher, give me a great defensive catcher, and I'll just live with it. You're now in a position where you need to trot a career 206 hitter out there over 100 times next year. That's tough to justify. This isn't a bad contract if I'm looking at it in a bubble, but to replace Jacob Stallings, one of the better catchers in baseball, with Roberto Perez, a guy who best case scenario is a backup, is tough. It is just tough for me to justify that. Moving on now to the Braves, signing Orlando Arcia to a 2-year deal worth $3 million. He'll earn $1.6 million next year, $1.3 million the year after. And there's a team option in 2024 worth $2 million that comes with a $100,000 buyout. So Arcia can actually make $4.9 million off this deal. And it's tough for me to kill this deal since it's for such a little amount of money. $1.5 million per year. I'm just not a big Arcia fan. I don't think he's that good. I've never really been that impressed with him. He had a solid sophomore season. Like, you thought he could turn into something after that, but no, he just fell off a cliff after that. I mean, he was good in the shortened season, but the Brewers got rid of him very quickly. He didn't even play a lot with the Braves. He played in 32 games. He had 214. There had to be someone better that the Braves could have gotten, right? Again, I don't want to slam my fist on the table and say this is a terrible move. It's $1.5 million per year. I just don't think Arcia is that good. His roster spot could go to someone a lot better. Moving on now to the Rangers, signing Cole Calhoun to a 1-year deal worth $5.2 million. There is a team option for $5.5 million for 2023 with no buyout. And this doesn't count as the Rangers getting better. Cole Calhoun isn't that good. He hasn't hit over 245 since 2016. I mean, I remember once upon a time, Cole Calhoun was looked at as a really good young outfielder. Like, him and Mike Trout together would do really good things with the Angels. It just never really panned out. Calhoun had a few good years. And sure, he never really lost his power with the Angels. He just didn't hit for average a lot with them. His last year with the Angels was 2019. He had 232. Now he had 33 home runs, which is impressive. Alright, good job there. The thing is, though, you'd like that 232 average to be a little higher. And a 325 on base percentage doesn't make up for that. I mean, Calhoun was really good in the shortened season. Hit 16 home runs in 54 games. But last year he hit just .235 with 5 home runs and 17 RBIs. He actually played in less games last year than he did in the shortened season. I'm selling Calhoun stock. I'm kind of low on him at this point. I'm not going to kill the Rangers for signing him. I mean, they did need outfield help. And I'll say this, you pair Cole Calhoun with Adolis Garcia, that has the makings of a really good power-hitting outfield. This isn't a bad move for the Rangers, it just doesn't move the needle a ton for them. I mean, it's a good move. I'm not going to kill it. $5.5 million for Calhoun is fair. Sure, I'll take a $5.5 million gamble on a guy who hit 33 home runs in 2019. I have no problem with that. It just doesn't move the needle a ton. That's the thing. Moving on now to the Nationals, signing Cesar Hernandez to a 1-year deal worth $4 million. And this is a good move. I like Hernandez. Good player. Solid player. You could do worse than him. There are worse players in the majors than Cesar Hernandez. I'm not saying he's great. He's not. But he's a guy who usually will hit for a solid average, about 270, 275-ish, give you good speed, and play a good second base. There's a role for Cesar Hernandez in the majors. I understand that he had a down year last year in terms of his average. He hit 232. That's the lowest mark of his career. And he had a 308 on-base percentage. That's not good. But he did hit 21 home runs. He did have 62 RBIs. I mean, the Nationals needed infield help. Think about the Nationals infield for a minute. Josh Harrison was traded to the Athletics. He's now a free agent, but I don't see the Nationals bringing him back. Trey Turner's a Dodger. Starlin Castro's a free agent. Alcides Escobar's a free agent. Ryan Zimmerman's a free agent. You're waiting for Carter Kieboom to emerge. That hasn't happened yet. I think it's fair to wonder if he'll ever put it all together. Luis Garcia is talented, so you want to pencil Luis Garcia in at second base? I'm fine with that. And you want to move Hernandez to short? I'm fine with that too. Even though Hernandez is a Gold Glove winning second baseman, I don't trust Garcia to handle short. I'd rather slide Hernandez over to short. I trust him more there. It's also possible that the Nationals could make a big splash in free agency. Maybe they sign Nick Castellanos. Maybe they sign Chris Bryant. Maybe they want to give Kieboom another shot. I don't know. But regardless, Hernandez fills a big need for the Nationals. The contract is more than fair. Great job by Mike Rizzo. Moving on now to the Red Sox, signing James Paxton to a 1-year deal worth $10 million. The Red Sox do have team options for 2023 and 2024 that could push this deal up to $35 million. And I don't get this for the Red Sox. I don't understand how you look at James Paxton, see him get hurt with the Yankees during the shortened season, Then see him sign a 1-year prove-it deal with the Mariners, worth $8.5 million. See him need Tommy John surgery in April. He blew out his elbow after only 1 start. It's the second Tommy John surgery he's had. And then you give him a deal that's worth more than the prove-it deal he signed with the Mariners. It makes no sense. Like, here's the thing. You just lost Eduardo Rodriguez. How do you look at James Paxton and say, that's gonna be the guy that replaces him? He's the guy who's gonna help us go back to the ALCS. The Red Sox desperately need starting pitching. So you're going to throw $10 million at James Paxton? $10 million, and you know he's going to get hurt. Oh, man, I'm in the wrong business. I understand that lefties get more, but come on, there's got to be a limit. Look, I understand that Chris Sale and James Paxton form a nice 1-2 punch in terms of lefties in your rotation. And Nathan Eovaldi had a good year. Tanner Houck had a good year. You have Nick Pivetta as the 5th starter. That can work. The thing is, though, you know that Sale's going to get hurt. You know Paxton's going to get hurt. Eovaldi has an injury history. I don't get it. I don't know why you'd look at James Paxton and say that's the guy. Bad move by the Red Sox. I don't think it makes much sense. Maybe at face value it makes sense, but once you dig a little deeper, once you use your noodle, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. Moving on now to the Rays, trading Joey Wendell to the Marlins in exchange for Cameron Misner. That's it. That's the trade. It's a 1-for-1. And I like this move for the Marlins. I like Wendell. And the Marlins are making a concerted effort to get better. They just signed Sandy Alcantara to a big extension. They signed Avisail Garcia to a big deal. They're done being laughingstocks. They're putting their pedal to the metal and are going to try to make a run at a playoff spot. I'm not saying it's going to work. I'm just saying I admire the competitive spirit. I mean, Wendell's a good player. Made the All-Star team last year, hit .265 with 11 home runs and 54 RBIs. Has decent speed. We heard the rumor that the Rays were open to trading Wendell, so this can't come as much of a surprise. I mean, what did I say the other day? That the Marlins could stand to upgrade at third. Brian Anderson seems to have topped out. Well, they just did that by trading for Joey Wendell. As for the Rays, this is just a little confusing to me. You won 100 games last year. You were the best team in the American League. Tell me why you're selling off one of your better players. Tell me how you look at Corey Kluber and say he's a better fit for this team than Joey Wendell. I mean, they got a good prospect in Misner. He's very strong. He has good speed, a good glove. I mean, it's possible we could see Misner next year. He's already played in Double-A, and in limited time there, he looked good. He had .309. Look, the Rays got equal value for Wendell. There's no question. I just don't think this is the right thing for them to do when they just won 100 games. They just showed their fan base that they're willing to spend a little money. Signing Kluber, signing Brooks Raley, signing Wander Franco to his big extension. Now you're going to trade Wendell? In a trade that really won't help you next year? It's just bizarre. I don't get it. I don't understand the logic. This move makes more sense for the Marlins. They win this trade. So yesterday was the deadline for teams to tender contracts to their arbitration-eligible players. By doing that, you keep them under your control. By not tendering them, you send them into free agency. And there were some interesting moves, but I'll only talk about one. Just because there were so many guys that were non-tendered. I know people are interested in hearing what I think of this. The Yankees bringing back Gary Sanchez. The thing is, though, bringing back is a little bit of a misnomer. Because, yes, they didn't get rid of him outright. But they can still trade him. Just because you tender a guy a contract doesn't mean that you're not gonna trade him. Luis Castillo was tendered a contract. He may be traded by the Reds. This doesn't preclude the Yankees from trading Sanchez. It really doesn't mean that Gary Sanchez will be a Yankee in 2022. I mean, there's actually logic behind bringing him back. Who did I say that the Yankees should try to trade for? Mitch Garver. And this isn't just me pulling a guy out of a hat. That idea has been mentioned before, specifically by a couple writers from the Star Tribune, a newspaper in Minnesota. I didn't come up with the idea myself. So let's think about the anatomy of a Mitch Garver trade. What would the Twins want? They'd probably want a catcher. The free agent market is barren. There are no good catchers left in free agency. You got some backups floating around, but no one who excites you. Say what you want about Gary Sanchez, but I think a new fan base would see him as a guy who can hit 20 home runs at a position where power is uncommon. Yes, he hits for a low average. Yes, his defense is bad. But I think Twins fans would look at him as a guy who they could fix. Also, if the Twins trade Garver, who are their catchers? Ryan Jeffers and Ben Rortvedt. Gary Sanchez has a higher upside than those two guys. I mean, Rortvedt strikes me as a quadruple A player. Jeffers has a little bit of talent, but not as much as Sanchez. Gary Sanchez is not a terrible player, but there are just some players that wear out their welcome in a city. The fan base turns on you. It's just clear that it's not going to work out. And that especially holds true in New York. Could Sanchez turn his career around in Minnesota? Yes. Will he turn his career around with the Yankees? No. That will not happen. So I think Sanchez could be part of a Garver trade. If the Yankees non-tender Sanchez, then you're giving up another prospect. With Sanchez in the deal, maybe you're giving up one, maybe two prospects, as opposed to two or three. I mean, I don't want to speculate on what prospects the Twins would want. I don't think they'd get anyone great. I don't think they'd get a Dominguez or a Peraza or a Volpe or someone like that, but maybe a lesser guy. This doesn't guarantee that Gary Sanchez will be a Yankee next year. All it means is that the Yankees aren't going to give him away for nothing. And at the end of the day, if the Twins aren't going to trade Garver, if they want to build around him, and the Yankees did non-tender Sanchez, then they're screwed. Because they're looking at Kyle Higashioka and blank. Maybe they'd lure Georgie Posada out of retirement. For nothing else other than insurance, it makes sense to bring Sanchez back. Look, I want Sanchez gone too, but again, if Mitch Garver is going to stay with the Twins or go somewhere else, Sanchez is better than Higashioka. He's better than anyone in free agency. This actually isn't a terrible move by the Yankees. It makes sense. It's not going to placate the fan base, but it's not a bad move or anything. I'll tell you what would be a bad move, though. Eschewing Carlos Correa for Isaiah Kiner-Falefa or Andrelton Simmons. We've heard this rumor before that the Yankees were more interested in the second tier of shortstops. We've heard Simmons linked to the Yankees for a while. And I like Simmons. Good fielder. Not as bad a bat as people make him out to be. I understand last year he had a bad year. He had 223. But the year before he had 297. The year before that he had 264. The year before that he had 292. He's not bad. And Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, we heard linked to the Yankees, especially after the Rangers signed Seager and Simeon. I mean, I would take Kiner-Falefa. I'd rather have Kiner-Falefa than Simmons. Kiner-Falefa has more speed, a little more positional versatility. He's younger. He'd be under team control for longer. I'd rather have Kiner-Falefa. Here's the thing, though. Here's what I don't like. The reason why the Yankees are going after those guys. If you wanted to tell me they didn't like Trevor Story because he's helped too much by Coors Field, I totally get that. I'm not a Story fan. If you want to tell me that adding Correa would upset the locker room, there are still players upset with him over what he did in 2017, I'd understand that. You're concerned about the fan reaction. I get that. I mean, here's what would be great. If the Yankees Twitter account put out a poll, do you want us to sign Carlos Correa? If the majority is yes, they sign Correa. If the majority is no, Correa signs elsewhere, and then the Yankees say, you told us you didn't want him. We weren't going to cram him down your throat anyway. That would actually be kind of funny. The thing is, though, the reason that the Yankees are linked to these guys is because of their two big shortstop prospects, Oswald Peraza and Anthony Volpe. The logic makes no sense, and I'm going to tell you why. Firstly, Volpe's going to take a while to get to the bigs. He's never played above high A. So, best case scenario, you're getting him in 2023. Peraza can come up next year, okay? That would make sense. He spent the majority of his time in AA last year. Maybe he starts in Scranton, rakes there, comes up. I'd have no problem with that. Here's the thing, though. You're making a huge assumption. You're eschewing Carlos Correa, one of the best players in baseball. Someone who, if you were to write down on a piece of paper what the Yankees needed, it would look a lot like Correa for a wild card. You have no idea what Peraza is going to be. You don't know if Peraza is going to be great. You don't know if he's going to be terrible. And Volpe, how does he factor into this? How do we look at a guy who's never played above high A and say he's the reason that we're not going to sign Carlos Correa? See, here's the thing. You keep hearing about the two shortstops. Last time I checked, you can only play one shortstop at a time. So you've got to get rid of one anyway. And don't tell me you're going to put Giancarlo Stanton in the outfield full time. By the time Volpe comes up, Stanton's going to be a full-time DH. If he's not penciled in that role already. You want to tell me you want to try one of these guys in a different position? I'm okay with that. But don't be surprised if it fails. You tried Gleyber Torres out of position. Look how that worked. You tried Rob Refsnyder out of position. Look how that worked. These guys have very limited experience at positions other than shortstop. Now, I understand that that's what the minor leagues are for. If the Yankees wanted to say to Volpe that he's going to start the season in AA and he's going to learn how to play third base, let him make those mistakes there. That is what the minor leagues are for, to learn new positions. But again, it was tried with Torres. It didn't work. It was tried with Refsnyder. It didn't work. It's not a guarantee that a guy like Volpe is going to be able to learn a new position. So again, the odds are you're going to have to trade one anyway. Let's say Peraza pans out. Where does that leave Volpe? There's no spot for him. So you're trading him anyway. Let me throw a scenario at you. You try him at third or second or wherever, and it doesn't work. You lower his value, and now you're not getting as much for him as you could have before. A typical Brian Cashman move. You wait until it's too late to try to trade someone. See, here's the thing. I'm looking at a guy in Correa who, yes, would cost a ton of money, would absolutely break the bank. There's no question, but is an absolutely perfect fit for the Yankees. So let me ask you something. What's better for the Yankees? Signing Correa and trading Peraza and or Volpe for starting pitching or Mitch Garver or something like that, a position of need? Or going for a short-term fix, hoping that Peraza pans out, and needing to get rid of Volpe anyway, or hope that he can learn a new position? The answer is the former. I'm not saying get rid of these guys for some has-been, or some guy who you're going to have at the end of his career. I'm talking about a guy in Carlos Correa who is in the prime of his career, who's a 2-time All-Star, who's 27, and will probably be good for the next 8 years. This isn't signing some guy at the age of 30. This is signing one of the best players in baseball at the age of 27 who's going to be good for the next 8 years. And you can use these top prospects to address other positions of need. Peraza and Volpe for Luis Castillo. Who says no? It's not all doom and gloom for the Yankees yet. But I'll tell you, if they don't sign Correa, I'm going to be really ticked off. Because there's no good reason not to. Alright, now I'll give you some NHL Valk talk. And I'll start with the Devils signing Jack Hughes to an 8-year extension worth $64 million. That's $8 million per year. And this is an overpay. Does Jack Hughes have a ton of talent? The answer is yes. I like watching him play. But it's very risky to pay a guy on potential. Sometimes when you do that, it blows up. We think of Jack Hughes as this great player. He really hasn't been that for the Devils. In his rookie season, he put up 21 points, was a -26, didn't get a single Calder Trophy vote. Last year, he put up 31 points in 56 games. This year, he's only played in 3 games. Now, granted, he has 3 points in those 3 games. He's a very talented player. And the thing is, Hughes was going to be an RFA at the end of this season. So it's possible that another team could have swooped in and signed Hughes to this type of a contract. So I don't begrudge the Devils for doing this. Jack Hughes is a part of their future. Along with guys like Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, Dawson Mercer, Pavel Zacha, Dougie Hamilton, and Mackenzie Blackwood. But this is an overpay. I know why the Devils did it. I'm not going to kill them for it. But I'm also not going to sing their praises. They overpaid for him. There's no way around that. They had to do it, but it's still tough to defend an overpayment like this for a guy who only has 55 career points in the NHL. Moving on now to Jake DeBrusk, drawing trade interest from around the NHL. We had heard the rumor that he had requested a trade. It's one thing to request a trade. It's another thing to have other teams want you. And according to Nick Kyprios of Sportsnet, the Oilers, Flames, Blues, and Hurricanes are interested in him. And I'm sure there are other teams that are also in the mix. The proverbial mystery teams. And I don't blame teams for being interested in DeBrusk. He's 25, and he started out his career like a bat out of hell. He put up 43 points his rookie season. Put up 27 goals his sophomore season. Put up 35 points his junior season. But then he took a major step back last year. Only put up 14 points. And this year he only has 6 points in 18 games. He has fallen out of favor in Boston. He wants out. I think the Bruins want to trade him. That is headed for a divorce. I'd hesitate to give up anything more than a 3rd-round pick for DeBrusk. I know what you're thinking. If you trade for him, you can turn him into that top 6 player that you saw early in his career. I just don't know if he's that guy anymore. I mean, think about a guy like Nail Yakupov. We think of Yakupov as this big bust, and he is one of the biggest busts in NHL history, if not the biggest. But he actually had a solid rookie season, put up 31 points in 48 games. He had Calder Trophy votes. Then after that, he got worse and worse and worse. The Blues and Avalanche tried to fix him. They couldn't. They saw the potential. They saw the talent. But he just didn't have what it took to be a continued success in the NHL. It's possible that that's DeBrusk's fate. A guy who, if I'm being generous, is a bottom 6 forward. And even then he hasn't looked like that the last couple seasons. Like I said, I'd hesitate to give up anything more than a 3rd. And even then, that's pushing it. Only reason why I'm going that high is because there are other teams in the mix. And if I'm a GM of a team that really wants him, I know that I need to win that bidding war. So I'll go a little higher than I really want to, but I won't go crazy. There were a couple really sad deaths that happened in the baseball world the other day. They were both announced yesterday. I'll start with Don Demeter, who died on Monday at the age of 86. It's okay if you don't know the name Don Demeter. Sounds like Doug Dimmadome, the owner of the Dimsdale Dimmadome. Yeah, I watched Fairly Odd Parents. But there was a time when Demeter was one of the better players in baseball. From 1961 to 1966, he had a peak that was really good. Demeter's first extended taste of the majors came in 1959. He replaced Duke Snider in center field for the Dodgers. Imagine the pressure that's on Demeter. I have to take over for one of the best center fielders of this era, a future Hall of Famer, and I'm only 23 years old at this point. Demeter wasn't bad. He had .256 with 18 home runs and 70 RBIs. That year, the Dodgers beat the White Sox in the World Series. Demeter had a good series that year. He had .250. The year after that, he got hurt, fractured his wrist, and that really spelled the end of his time with the Dodgers. Willie Davis had kind of supplanted Demeter, so he was traded to the Phillies along with Charlie Smith for Turk Farrell and Joe Coppy. With the Phillies, Demeter really hit his stride. He finished the year hitting .251 with 21 home runs and 70 RBIs. He followed that up by hitting .307 with 29 home runs and 107 RBIs. He got MVP votes. The year after that, he had .258 with 22 home runs and 83 RBIs. He got MVP votes again. In fact, in September of 1962, Demeter started a streak of 266 consecutive errorless games in the outfield. That record stood for about 30 years. Darren Lewis ended up breaking it. Thank you, Wikipedia, for that. I did not know that. In the 63 offseason, the Phillies wanted to add some more pitching. They really didn't know where to play Demeter. They tried him at third. It really didn't work out. They had Tony Gonzalez in center field. So Demeter was deemed expendable. They traded him, along with Jack Hamilton, to the Tigers for Gus Triandos, a former Yankee, and Jim Bunning, former Senator. We all know how that ended. 1964 Phillies, epic collapse, Bunning in short, get run into the ground, thank you, Gene Mauch. Demeter with the Tigers in 64 had a good year. He had .256 with 22 home runs and 80 RBIs. The year after that, his power kind of fell off a little bit. His wrist started barking. He was still solid, hit .278 with 16 home runs and 58 RBIs. But the year after that, the Tigers wanted to move on from him. They had Mickey Stanley ready to take over. So Demeter was traded to the Red Sox, along with Julio Navarro for Joe Christopher and Earl Wilson. Demeter had a nice run with the Red Sox. Didn't spend a ton of time there, only played in 93 games. But he hit .290, 10 home runs, 33 RBIs. But that was really the end of his run in the majors. Finished his career with the Indians, technically, but he was a shell of his former self. He was a good player, though. He was really just a victim of circumstance. In 1960, he gets hurt. Willie Davis takes over, so the Dodgers look to move him. He plays really well for the Phillies, but the Phillies were able to get one of the best starters in baseball in Jim Bunning. Then by the time he got to the Tigers, an old injury started affecting him. Mickey Stanley emerged. So he's traded to the Red Sox, where he's treated as a super utility guy. It's a shame. If Demeter could have been put in a spot where, he'd stay for like 10 years. Like, he's going to play center field for this team for 10 years. It'd be interesting to see where he'd land in history. He's regarded as a good player, maybe very good, not great. He certainly had the ability to be great. Like I said, he was just a victim of circumstance. The second death is the more notable one, a former Cy Young winner, LaMarr Hoyt. He also died on Monday at the age of 66 from cancer. LaMarr Hoyt is one of the biggest what-ifs in baseball history. In 1982, 1983, and 1985, he was just as good as any pitcher in baseball. Unfortunately, he had his demons, and they eventually destroyed a very promising career. Now, Hoyt was a late bloomer. He was actually drafted by the Yankees, which I didn't know. Thank you, Baseball Reference. He was traded to the White Sox in the deal that got the Yankees Bucky Dent. Oscar Gamble was also in that trade. So I think it's safe to say that trade worked out well for both sides. It took Hoyt a while to really find his footing. But he finally did in 1980. Split time between the bullpen and the starting rotation. He went 9-3 with a 4.57 ERA. The year after that, the White Sox put him in the bullpen full time. He went 9-3 with a 3.57 ERA. Then Tony La Russa put him back in the starting rotation. And that's when Hoyt really thrived. He found his stuff in 81. The stuff that made him a really good pitcher. In 82, he went 19-15 with a 3.53 ERA. He led the American League in wins that year. He won his first 9 decisions. He pitched 239 2/3 innings. He only walked 48 guys. The year after that, he went 24-10 with a 3.66 ERA. Pitched 260 2/3 innings. And only walked 31 guys. He won the AL Cy Young that year. Led the majors in WHIP. Got MVP votes. That year, the White Sox made it to the ALCS. They went up against the Orioles. Hoyt started game 1. Went up against Scott McGregor. And pitched a complete game where he only gave up 1 run and 5 hits. That was the only game the White Sox won in that series. They won that game 2-1. The year after that, the White Sox absolutely fell off a cliff. They went 74-88. Hoyt went from leading the majors in wins one year to leading the majors in losses the year after. He went 13-18 with a 4.47 ERA. After that, the White Sox traded him to the Padres in a big 7-player deal. That's actually how the White Sox got Ozzie Guillen. Hoyt was really good for the Padres. He went 16-8 with a 3.47 ERA, made his only All-Star team. He actually won All-Star Game MVP that year. Pitched 3 innings, gave up only 1 run, only walked 20 guys in 210 1/3 innings. He was great. It looked like he was going to dominate with the Padres for a really long time. Unfortunately, his demons caught up with him. In January and February of 1986, Hoyt was arrested on drug possession charges. After the second arrest, he went into rehab. Didn't pitch a lot in spring training. Because he couldn't build his arm up properly, he ended up with a rotator cuff injury. He pitched through it rather than risking surgery, and went 8-11 with a 5.15 ERA. After the season ended, Hoyt was arrested again for trying to bring 500 pills through the U.S.-Mexico border. He spent 45 days in jail. The Padres ended up releasing him. The White Sox gave him a second chance, but he was arrested on drug charges again, spent a year in prison. It's really a shame because this guy could have been really good. You think about the best pitchers of the 1980s. You probably think of guys like Roger Clemens, Doc Gooden, Oral Hershiser, David Cone, etc., etc. Sadly, you don't say LaMarr Hoyt, but you could have. If he didn't develop that drug problem, he never would have missed spring training, which meant his arm would have been stronger, which means his rotator cuff may not have been hurt, and his career would have ended a lot differently. It's really sad. It's a huge what if. May Don Demeter and LaMarr Hoyt both rest in peace. Until tomorrow, I'm Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.